I'm Julie Nelson. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for Great Rivers United Way, and this is the recording of Coffee and Conversations recorded on January 28th. It's about winter preparedness, being ready in case there's a house fire, a snowstorm, an ice storm, something like that where you're left without any power. So the good news is I did record this for you, and I cut out the part right away where everyone's going around the room and giving introductions and talking about themselves. But the bad part is I did start just a little bit late, and I missed the very opening by Molly McCormick from the American Red Cross. So we'll catch her in progress, but we just missed maybe 30, 60 seconds of it. So bear with it and enjoy the presentation. There is a lot of really useful information, and I hope you enjoy it.
But we're both very eager to share with you a lot of this information. And so we kind of broke down this presentation into just a general preparedness, and then specifically for home fire and winter storm. I would also like to preface that Greg and I are both former teachers. So we love the interaction. That's kind of where we feel people learn the best. Feel free to jump in and interrupt us at any point to ask a question. This is really about a conversation. We have a very large slide deck that we'll go through. However, it's really important that we're answering your questions or giving you the resources for your next step. And speaking of resources, before we even get into any information today, if you can walk away with one thing today, I would hope to give you these tools. redcross.org/prepare. If you type that in, it's going to take you, I heard Sue mention in the chat, she's looking for resources. The amount of resources that the Red Cross has and the partnerships that we have with other agencies like FEMA, it's an abundance, and it's going to be so helpful if you're looking for any kind of information. All the information that we're going to present today is a small piece of what's available on that website. We have things like emergency contact cards to carry around with you. I have kind of a sample here. Print it off, have it with you. It's really good to have in case technology fails on us. We know that can happen. But the last thing that I kind of wanted to mention before we got into the meat of the topic here is that the Red Cross offers two phenomenal apps. We have the emergency app and the first aid app. They are free. If you get the emergency app, I heard a lot of folks talking about travel, we've got people that spend part of their year in Colorado. Tanya mentioned that she travels for work. The app not only is great for alerting you to any kind of weather in your area, but if you're watching for other areas, if you have children or grandchildren that live across the country, it's a really great way to stay informed about what's going on all over the United States. If there is a shelter, a Red Cross shelter open in your area because of a disaster, you can locate it there. There's all kinds of checklists. It's just a really great resource. I can't recommend it enough. That being said, I'll just jump right into it. I think that if 2020 has taught us anything this year, is that disasters will strike, and they can strike often, and they don't care where you live. They don't care how much money you make. They don't care about any of that, and they don't care that a pandemic is going on. It was really a tough year across the United States for disaster. And I say this not to cause any kind of panic or any kind of fear, but just to hold that in your mind, because what we're going to do today, our purpose here today, is to get you prepared, to get you communicating and talking, to start this discussion. And one of the best ways to start that idea, that conversation, is to talk about what hazards are we facing. So anybody want to share what's something that we've faced or that's a threat here in Wisconsin? You can just shout it out.
Well, flood in La Crosse by the Mississippi.
Absolutely. This is my first time living in a flood prone area. And not only are you worried about the Mississippi and the tributaries, you're worried about that snow melt and how much that affects us. It's crazy. What else?
Home fires.
Absolutely. Home fire, just to give you an idea of how frequent they are, every 8 minutes in the United States, the Red Cross is responding to a home fire to provide assistance. So it's definitely a high danger, and why we're going to spend some time talking about it today. Any other thoughts before I give away some answers?
Well, obviously winter storms, and I suppose we haven't really thought about it, but it can be extreme heat in the summer.
Yeah, especially with the shift that we're seeing in climate. We have both ends of the spectrum right now in the Midwest. And that extreme heat can come into play in the summer, especially if you're traveling. Things to think about that maybe we haven't thought about in the past. And then tornadoes. We live, you know, with the bluffs, sometimes they protect us from tornadoes, but if a tornado gets down in those valleys, it can become quite dangerous. So it's really important to think about, what am I going to do if there's a big thunderstorm coming into my area? If I run a child care center, you know, how do I alert my parents? How are we going to do pickup? How are we going to keep people safe? So just thinking about each of these items, and making sure that you have a plan for them. Because really, at the end of the day, it's up to you to be ready. We're preparing you because in the time of a disaster, if a tornado strikes in this extreme winter weather that we've been having, first responders are amazing. They work so hard, they care so much, but they also get spread very thin. And so you can't always count on getting that help right away. So we need to think about, what can we be doing not only to prepare for ourselves, but prepare for the people that live with us, for our neighbors, for older adults. So if some of us have parents that we take care of, if you have elderly neighbors that you're also helping out with, things to start thinking about now. When we call it in Red Cross, we call it blue sky preparations. What am I doing when the storm isn't here? What am I doing to think about it to make sure that we're ready? And again, the number one thing here is that we're preparing you because, and Greg and I are very passionate about this, that if we can prepare you all, we can save lives. And that's really a big part of the mission with the Red Cross, not only to have you come donate blood and to respond when the storm happens, but the more we can do ahead of time, the better. So just to kind of gauge where we're at as a group, when you hear the word prepare, what comes into your mind?
I usually think of having stocks of food or gallons of water in the basement.
That's a great idea. Absolutely. Yeah. Preparing with those essentials. Any other ideas?
Knowing where to go if there is a tornado.
Knowing where to go. Yeah. Especially if you're not living in a traditional house, if you're living in an apartment, if you if you're up at your cabin, what are you going to do? And making sure that you have a plan for that. Great ideas. And really the mission here is that if you are prepared, you can save lives. If you are prepared, you can adapt to challenges quickly. And it makes the recovery process, when the disaster is over, because you've had a plan in place, you can get back on your feet quicker. Is it going to be perfect? No. Preparation isn't meant to make sure that you're not going to be impacted. What it does is it gives you confidence. I think that some of the information we're going to share today, you're going to think, well, Molly, isn't that kind of common sense? Absolutely. Sometimes preparation is common sense, but in a time of disaster, and we see this a lot at the Red Cross, and Greg's going to share a personal story from his past where when an emergency strikes, it's really hard to think clearly. So the more that we talk about it, even if it's common sense, the more that you communicate it out with the people that you care about, the better we're going to be, the safer you're going to be. And so that's kind of where our focus is going to be today. And at the Red Cross, we kind of, to be Red Cross ready, we focus on 3 areas, and Greg's going to give you the details for each of these items as it relates to those 2 topics of home fire and winter safety. But we believe, get a kit, make a plan, and be informed. If you're following those 3 models, you're going to be in good shape for any kind of disaster that strikes. And those tools that I told you about in the beginning, each of these 3 items you're going to see throughout those tools, and they're going to build you up in each of the areas. So before we get into specifics, making sure that you have a kit, just like Julie mentioned. Being prepared means having those provisions. So if you have a household kit for a winter storm, you're going to be in good shape. That kit should have at least 3 days worth of supplies. 2 weeks is better. That, you know, if you think about some of the winter storms that we've had in the past, we've been very fortunate that we've had some light winters in Midwest scale of things. But thinking about what could happen, and we have those ice storms, if roads are blocked, if you can't get out of your house, making sure that you have the supplies necessary. Another thing to have is a go bag. Kind of makes me think of a spy. Like, I got my go bag and my burner phone. But really, it's about having that ability to go if you need to go. A lot of us talked about in the beginning, having that fear if the power goes out and not having a heat source. Greg's going to talk about that. But if you need to leave your house because that heat source has become an extreme issue, have this ready to go. If someone's knocking on your door because the flood rivers are rising and they're saying you need to get out, if there is a chemical spill in your area because you live close to a highway, you need to have something that you can grab quickly and go. And then think about what's going to work best for you and your household. Does that mean that I'm going to have, you know, a small bag just for me, and then each of my household members have their own? Do I want one large backpack? Really, today is going to also be about customizing. So I'm not going to get too into specifics because it's about what you need and what your family's needs are. Because my family, we have different needs. We have different medical needs. And so what we put into our packs is going to differ a little bit from what Greg might put in his. So Julie, you mentioned it, gather the essentials. You said water, food. What else should we be putting? What can you guys think of that might be a good thing to put into a household emergency kit?
Medications.
Medications, yeah. When we talk about customizing your kit and thinking about winter storms especially, making sure that you have enough to keep going, and things that even non-prescriptions. My mother-in-law lives with us, and she takes baby aspirin because she has high blood pressure. Do we have an extra bottle just in case we get stuck in the house for a week? Those are all things to be considered. And when we talk about water, Julie, you said stacks of water in your basement. Water, we all know, is primary to life. Can anybody take a guess as to how much water one person needs per day?
Is it a gallon a day?
Ah, Julie, did you get the cheat sheet? It is a gallon a day. It is. And so we half of that rationed for drinking and half of that rationed for sanitary things. Thinking about it, if your power goes out and you live out in the country and you have a well, that could potentially mean that you're not going to have running water. When floods come in, the water can be contaminated. You don't want to run that water. So making sure that you have that resources, having non-perishable foods. And again, the resources that Greg and I are going to leave you with, we'll put a couple of checklists in the chat towards the end of the meeting, as well as I'm going to send them out to Julie so she can email them. We'll send you all of these checklists, all of these resources, so that you can really go through. And it can be overwhelming. We understand that there's a lot of information. So the recommendation is just take it one step at a time. Today, I'm going to worry about, do I have non-perishable food and water? Because I know that's the most important. Do I have an emergency blanket? It's something silly and little. You can pick them up at Walmart for, you know, $1 or $2. They're not very expensive, but they're extremely beneficial to keep in your car.
So on the water thing, how likely is it if the power went out, would you lose water?
So it really depends on your situation and what kind of well you have. But I do understand that some well pumps are dependent on electricity. So it just depends on your setup. So it's really important and that I put this out there so you think about it. If I lose power, am I going to lose water? If we have flooding coming in, or if the water gets contaminated, if you've been following the news, some of the wells out on the northern side of La Crosse have come back and they have higher levels of chemicals because of a fire that was in the area a couple years ago. And then they've done some research on the French island water sources as well. So you never know what could happen or what opportunity might present itself. So just know your house, know where you live, know what your options are. And so that's kind of what I would recommend and why we talk about this. So that's a great question, Julie. And if you're in a cabin off the grid, what does that mean for you? I love the idea of solar. I'm so excited that Mike joined us because solar is a great option. You're not gonna have to worry about the power lines going out. But also being prepared for that and having something small, as this is a little power bank. You charge it up in advance. You just have it with you. If your cell phone loses power and you're out for the night for power, this is a great way to make sure that you always have that contact information that you're going to need. And the other thing that we recommend is making sure that you have a kit and you have some stuff going on in your cars. Just, you can even raise your hand. How many of you keep a blanket in your vehicle? Yeah, it's a very Midwest thing to do. And I hope that you do, because that's what, during the winter months. But beyond a blanket, do you have a first aid kit in your car? Do you have food and water? Even though that water bottle might freeze if you're stuck in your car because of an ice storm hitting, and we recommend you stay in your car. Are you prepared to stay in there for a little while? And Greg will talk about what that will be like too. Make a plan. That's what kind of the big message here, just like I was saying after Julie's question there, is know what's going on and communicate it out. So we already know what disasters are likely to affect us. We need to start thinking about household members that are traveling. If you have adult children that are coming back from college, or you have a job that requires you to travel like Tanya, if you work with daycares and people are coming and going to pick up their kids, think about what that plan looks like and how you're going to communicate with those individuals. Think about different needs. Do you have someone with a walker in your life? Do you have someone with a wheelchair in your life, and what that looks like? And then also, you can't forget about our little fur babies. I've got 2, and I can guarantee if a fire went off, they would not be calm and cool about it. So what are we going to do? What am I going to do to make sure that I take care of the individuals that I care about the most? And the best way that we can do that is to communicate, to have these conversations now. If we have to evacuate, where are we going to go? That storm that went through this summer in Iowa, the derecho, it knocked out cell phone service and internet service for a really long time. I responded. I was down there helping to get emergency supplies out. And those folks weren't able to communicate via phone. So that's why you have to do it now. Where are we going to meet if we're not together and cell phone goes out and we can't go back home? Where are we going to meet if there's a fire? Where are we going to, how are we going to communicate with our children that live across the United States? Important records, how are you keeping them safe? And what does it mean to shelter in place? A lot of you brought that up in your introductions of how am I going to keep myself and my household safe? So make a plan and practice your plan. It doesn't do just to talk about it. Take that next step, make your kit, be informed. And how you can get informed, those resources that we mentioned at the beginning, the resources that we'll send out, as well as making sure that you have either a battery operated or a crank radio. In the event that you don't have power, in the event that the cell phones go dead, or you drop, if you're like me, if I'm panicked, I get clumsy, I drop my phone. I can drop it in a snowbank, I can drop it, I've dropped it in buckets of water before. You never know what can go wrong with technology. And so just having a backup plan, so that way you can hear on the radio, have they opened a warming shelter? Have they dedicated an evacuation site so that I have somewhere to go if I need to be safe? And that's kind of my spiel. And I'm happy to answer questions as we go. Feel free again. But I'm going to turn it over to Greg, who's going to be our home fire and our winter storm expert for today. Greg, take it away, sir.
Thank you very much, Molly. Thank you. We're going to now build on the foundation set down by Molly. And again, we want to repeat the importance of preparedness. We are not helpless in the face of emergencies. And to have the preparation behind us and before us can really help us in the future when we face hazards like home fires, which are more common in Wisconsin than you might imagine. And of course, the ubiquitous winter storms that we've all grown up with. Yes. So let's look at preparations for these two events. Next slide, please. Causes for home fires. Has anyone here in our group today witnessed a home fire or experienced a home fire? No? Well, wait, Judy?
Yes. Yes, my house burned down. I think 1979 was when it happened. Yeah, and it was related to faulty wiring.
I see. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Mhm.
I was immediately thinking about my fellow citizens out in California this past summer and fall, where they had a double whammy, where they had wildfires and home fires. Thousands of people were affected. Thousands of people lost their homes and some lost their lives. So it shows you the extent to the scope of seriousness we're talking about here. Thus
We were not right in the fires in Colorado, but we were about 4 miles from the evacuation zone. That's as close as it came. And we don't keep records and things out at the Colorado house, but it really made us think about what would we want to get out of there, because at that point we had come back to Wisconsin. So our two sons who live out there went to the house, and we needed to tell them what we wanted them to take out of there. So we needed to think about that.
Yes, yes. There's a second example right there. Are there any other experiences you'd like to share, members of the group, on home fires? Well, as we step back now and looking at this situation, we notice that 46%, believe it or not, 46% of home fires are caused from cooking, improper cooking procedures, leading to 19% of the deaths in that regard. I'd like to share with you an event in my history as a human being that's with me as if it happened yesterday. It happened over 50 years ago. I was 13 years old. The year is 1963. And my 6-year-old cousin, living on a farm with her mom and dad, my aunt and uncle, and two of my cousins, her sisters, lived on this farm. And they also had a grandfather living in the house. So they were like a 3-generation household. Well, one morning, my 6-year-old cousin, evidently an imitation of her parents, decided to cook her own oatmeal on the stove. Now, the grandfather was rather immobile, living in the house, but he was in the next room, was not aware of what his granddaughter was doing. She pulled up a chair, had placed some water inside the pot, and was trying to boil up the water. And she was up there standing on the chair next to the stove, and was getting ready to evidently start cooking up the oatmeal. And she was wearing loose-fitting pajamas. And as she was doing the cooking, the pajamas caught fire, and she became so frightened and panicked. She was running throughout the house screaming. Now her parents and her siblings were doing the chores down in the barn. The only other adult was the grandfather. And he heard the screams And he tried to get up from his chair and his cane to run her down, to hold her down so he could roll her up and inside the carpet to put out the fire. But her screams were so loud. Her father said it reached the parents in the barn. So they ran up as fast as they could. The grandfather, just as they were coming back into the house, the grandfather finally got a hold of her to hold her down to try to put out the flames with the carpet. But the harm was so deep. The first degree burns were so common on her body that she died 2 days later in the hospital. Her kidneys eventually shut down. And so that was my first funeral. And my aunt almost did not survive that because she felt so guilty. And the grandfather felt even more guilty. So home fires can kill. They can kill children. They don't discriminate by age, as you know. And more people die from these home fires than we might imagine. According to a recent La Crosse Tribune article, Why the Spike in Area Fires? It was written that the American Red Cross Wisconsin Division reported that since Thanksgiving in Wisconsin, we've had 400 home fires statewide. That's how common they are in Wisconsin this year. So we're talking about a real danger because electrically, there can be fires started too. You mentioned Judy. Judy, you mentioned faulty wiring. Well, going to the beginning, or rather the middle of this diagram, this graph, 25% of those fires are caused by electrical problems. And if you take a look more specifically, 16% caused by malfunctioning equipment. And also 19% by improper use of equipment. So for instance, if you have a space heater in your home, you should only plug it into the wall receptacle. Don't plug it into extension cords. You're asking for trouble if you do. You're starting to overload the system. So that's a very big part of this kind of hazard, 25%. But guess what? Smoking in itself is one of the biggest hazards for home fires. 5% of the home fires are started by smoking or smokers, but look at how far it jumps up in that blue block, 22% of the deaths. That's the highest rate of deaths of all the causes for home fires. That tells us something. Could we go to the next?
Yeah, and Greg, I'll just mention in Wisconsin, just this week alone, we've lost 6 individuals to home fires since this weekend. And so when we talk about this and the severity of it, that's why it's so pressing on us that we communicate it. And Greg, you did such a great job of talking about this. We can go ahead because you've already talked about cooking and the risk of plugins, that I'm going to jump ahead a little bit for time.
Sorry to interrupt. I need to go to another appointment. Thank you so much for having me. And Julie, I'll reach out to you, if not this week, next week.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Okay, I'd like to read to you again from this. This Tribune article is so timely for us. The other part of the article said this: a family of 4 lost their home and nearly all their possessions after a January 10th fire in the town of Holland. Home and Area Fire Department Chief Buck Manley said the lives of the family members were likely saved by working smoke detectors. Smoke detectors save lives. I've just tested mine this morning. I test them actually every week. They say every month, but I do it every week. And it's always said that it's best to have it in each bedroom where you sleep. We also have one out in our hallway that connects the 3 bedrooms in case the smoke comes through there. I have one here in the basement as well. Again, we test them at least every month for the strength of the battery. They do need to be maintained properly and be replaced after 10 years. Of course, this goes without saying, don't ever disable a smoking alarm. That could be rather costly. So as the fire chief told us, they do save lives. And we want to say again that one of the best partnerships, one of the biggest partnerships I believe Red Cross has is with fire departments. Could we go to the next one, please? What are we going to do? This is what this seminar is really all about. Pre-planning, knowing what to do. Get out and stay out. Find a safe escape route. If there's smoke, get low. Why? Because smoke rises. When we're dealing with little kids on this, for instance, on the pillowcase project, we talk about the crab walk, getting down to the ground, the crab walk, to get out. So that can save lives. And we've got 2 minutes. We've got 2 minutes to get out. Meet at the designated safe meeting place. This could be a tree across the street, for example, at the end of your property. Everybody should know ahead of time where that meeting place is. Call 911 once you're safe. Again, you've got less than 2 minutes. Next, please. Escape routes. Now, I live in a 3-generation home. The grandparents live in the basement. A grandchild and the parents live upstairs. That's my workshop in the back of me. We have our own special plan escape route, as you should have as well. In our house, we decided that our first rule of evidence is going to be, how do we get to the front door? And how do we get to that front door safely as a family together? So there's 2 exits from every room. I can't say enough about this, whether they be the door or the window. Have your children and grandchildren practice with the windows and doors so they open easily. Do you know where the escape ladders are? Have you had some practice with those? In case you're in a multi-story situation, some of you might live in a 1-story home. You might have several stories in your home or apartment. Keep your escape routes clutter-free. You can see the map right there. Those maps are something you should set down with your family, and you should rehearse this at least twice a year. Physically rehearse it, so all members of the family are involved. Next, please.
And we covered a lot of this already, Greg. You hit it really well, so I'm going to go on to the next slide,
Okay.
because you talked
All right.
about having a meeting place.
Okay, all right. Now, we also must practice this process if we have pets. And we also have to keep in mind those people who have certain functional abilities and certain needs. What kind of access are we going to offer to them into this process? So we have to keep that in mind as well. We might have somebody who has trouble getting around physically, who will need extra help. We have to keep that in mind in our plan. And also, you can assign evacuation assistance too in this regard. So for instance, if you have a 2-year-old son, that's 2-year-old son's going to have some assistance to evacuate. The mom might be the primary person. If the mom's not there, it might be the dad. So all these things must be pre-planned and must be practiced once again, at least twice a year. That way, it really kind of sinks into everybody as to, this is what we are going to do if we have a home fire. The next one, please.
Yeah, and Judy and I talked a little bit before this presentation, because she lives in an apartment in La Crosse, and this weekend the smoke alarm in the building went off, and they were leaving, and she and I were talking. She said, you know, Molly, I'm not sure what some of the other people in my building that, you know, they have walkers, they have wheelchairs. I'm not sure what they would do. And we started to talk about that, because as Greg mentioned, that the thing that we advise is that you get out, and you get out as fast as you can, but making sure that you have a plan to do so, and what to do if you do get stuck. And so we kind of talked about making sure that you have either like getting someone like an air horn that might live in a tall building, that they can go out the window and make a loud noise, for having some kind of big colorful banner that they could wave out to draw the attention of people that they need the help. So if you cannot get out of the building, then you need to make sure that you have a plan for that. And again, making sure that if you have someone with ambulatory difficulties, that they have a person that's going to be there to help them. Judy and I talked about that the neighbors could be assigned to help each other out. And what a great thought that you could come together as a community to support each other.
Hey, Molly? It
Yeah.
reminds me of a question I had regarding a little bit more of the power goes out and the cell towers go down. If you're trapped in your house and you really do need some medical help, how can you let the world know that to send an ambulance or whatever?
Yeah, great question. So if communication, your traditional, the phones have gone out, the power is out, that's why it's so important to have this plan in place, that you have a network of people that you have connected with, somebody nearby, but also someone that's outside of that area so that they can call. And so, for instance, Judy shared with me that one of her neighbors lives on his own and is a little more secluded. He likes his privacy. So he needs to have someone trusted that can maybe give the sheriff a call, give the county a call, give local law enforcement a call if that's outside, that has phone service, because first responders have their own system. When our power goes out, when our phone systems go out, they have a different network that should kick on and go into place. And so even when our phones aren't working, hopefully most of the time the first responders are still going to have phone lines so that they can call and say, hey, I'm really worried about my grandfather. He lives at this place. He has medical concerns. If he doesn't have power, can you please go check on him? That helps the first responders prioritize where they're going to give that assistance. And so that's a great question, making sure that you have a network. Greg shared with me that he has a neighbor that he knows that when that winter storm kicks in, that he's going to make sure that he goes over and checks on her, make sure that she has food and water. So it's really about a network and coming together as a community. We can't really emphasize that enough. Does that help answer that question, Julie?
A little bit, I guess. So if the power went out and one of us fell down the stairs, or my husband had a heart attack, which isn't what you would expect on the second day the power's out, how would we put the red flag out the window to say, come and get us if
yeah.
access?
And so it's about having those resources as well. We highly recommend that somebody in the house is trained in first aid and CPR. In the event of a heart attack, CPR can help save a life. Making sure that you have that background and that resource is something that we recommend for preparation. And eventually down the road, we will be offering hands-only CPR, which is good if someone goes into cardiac arrest. We'll offer that class for free to communities. We just don't have it quite up and running yet. And then that app, so if you don't have power, but you have access to that app and you've saved some of the things, that first aid app will have things that you can be doing to support those individuals if there's some kind of medical issue going on. And the best bet, again, you said raise the red flag. You can make a sign, you can, get to your closest neighbor. If you have concerns or you're a little bit older and you've got someone nearby that might have a big truck, a big four-wheel truck, if you can get to them and ask for assistance. Know your neighbors. That's a really big part of preparation. So that's what I would recommend, Julie. And again, the resources that we have might go into a little more depth about that planning, but the biggest thing that we recommend is having that network of support.
Okay, thanks.
Judy, go ahead.
So I'm wondering if maybe having the bullhorn or some kind of a loud noisemaker and letting your community partner, the neighbor know that if the bullhorn goes off, please help me get some help.
That's why I think some emergency kits have a whistle in them.
Uh-huh.
You can blow that whistle, but you should let your neighbors know ahead of time that, yes, if we need your help with something, blow that whistle.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and Judy's absolutely right. That bullhorn, it's going to draw attention. The playoffs are over. If someone hears that bullhorn, they're gonna know that it's not quite right. You can just lay on your horn a bunch of times in your car if you need to, something to draw attention, to get people to know something's not right. That's what I would recommend. So great questions, not always a full answer, but just thinking about it and what you're going to do. How can I draw attention? How can I make sure that I have a network to support me? All right, Greg,
I'm wondering what the time we have left, if we should go immediately to winter hazards.
let's do that. And then I know, Audrey, for you, this was, is it Audra? This was something that was important to you. We have a whole lot of resources. If you want to connect with me, I'd be happy to share specifically for childcare, some resources that might be handy.
That would be great. Yeah. Thank you.
No problem. Go ahead, Greg.
Well, fellow Wisconsinites, we know what we're talking about, right? Winter storms. But do we know what to do in preparation for such storms? And we get them every year. But sometimes in some places, people are so unprepared, they die as a result. One extreme example happened on January 10th. Maybe you heard about it. Madrid, Spain had over 15 inches of snow in one fell swoop, the largest depth of snow they've had in over 50 years, and they were wholly unprepared. They did not invest money in tax dollars in snow removal equipment. So as a result, people were stranded out on the roadways. Some froze to death. Some made the mistake of leaving their cars so that when emergency crews finally got through, they couldn't find the people. All kinds of things happen in a chain reaction because of a lack of preparation. So again, like home fires, lack of preparation can also be deadly for winter storms. Can impact every state. Even my friends in Texas get snow, for example. Now there's 3 different storm alerts. One is the advisory. That's expected to be hazardous weather. We can expect certain inconveniences. We need to be aware, exercise caution, and again, monitor updates on your emergency radio that you have with you in your car or in your home. Watch for storm alerts on the watch. Winter storm possible 36 to 48 hours. We're expecting significant snow, sleet, ice, and wind possible. And again, be Red Cross ready. Again, monitor your updates. Most seriously of them all, and the one that hit Madrid, for example, was life-threatening winter conditions. And that also was a warning down in Illinois just a couple of days ago in southern Wisconsin. There was a warning issued, significant impact and life-threatening conditions likely. A lot of snow and ice. Here's where we have to take action. Let's go back to what was said before by Molly on enhancing our kits. Check those out on a timely basis. I would like to give to you a symbol. This is a snow shovel, a miniature snow shovel of sorts, 26 inches long. I got it at a hardware store, and it's the most important part of safety I have, preparations I have in my trunk, along with my kit as well. So this will fit easily in your trunk or in the back of your truck. There may be times when you'll have to shovel yourself out to get back on the road again. Also, I suggest a 70-pound bag of tubular sand. That can give you extra weight in, I think, distribution in the back of your car, greater traction, but it's the sand inside that you can also use to help you with the traction on your tires in case you're stuck. So include also that. Ice melt, warm clothes again, blankets in your car, vehicle kit. Tailor your plan. Identify where your warming centers are in your community. In La Crosse, we have one. They're downtown La Crosse. That's a warming center set up by the Franciscans. Prepare for power outages, because those power outages are going to really test your mettle in terms of how you might keep yourself warm. We'll say more about that later. Stay informed. Use your emergency radio system. The NOAA system is with the Department of Commerce, sends out reports for communities across the country. That service is really worth its weight in gold. Next one, please. Before a winter storm, check your kits again. Prepare to stay indoors for multiple days. And again, I know this sounds repetitious, but I think it should be. That radio is a lifeline. And if you can use it, your cell phone is a lifeline too. So monitor that. That's what we did. I had the Red Cross app right here for Chicago, Bangor, where I live, La Crosse, Madison. And that's where I learned about the storm that my wife and I went into when we left Bangor Monday night. And our son called us when we were in Chicago en route, said, stop, check into a hotel. This is a huge winter storm down here. People are getting killed. Don't come down here. That's how serious it was. Next one, please. Oh, yes, that picture. We have to go through that picture, but that's quintessential Wisconsin right there. Yes, it is. Signs of frostbite. You've experienced this. Numbness, waxy appearance, discoloration, cold to the touch. But how do we avoid frostbite? Here again, that radio system we have, that reporting system, we can know the wind chill, take in warm fluids, stay active, move around, limit your time outside, and dress again in layers. Right now, because I'm in my basement, I have 3 layers on right now in my own house. I just thought I'd throw that in there. Thank you. Next one. So frostbite treatment. We've got to get to a warmer place. Do not, under any circumstances, rub the skin or pop blisters. Yes, you know this. We have to remove the wet clothing soon. We have to soak the affected area in warm water. Wrap with sterile gauze. That's where that first aid kit comes in handy. And we have to seek medical attention, and don't delay seeking that attention, because this is serious business. Next, please. Yes, hypothermia, when the inner core body temperature goes down, is dangerous, can be life-threatening. What are the signs? Maybe has anyone witnessed anyone in the stages of hypothermia in your own experience? There are signs. Difficulty speaking, slurred speech can be a sign of hypothermia. Sleepiness, grogginess, confusion, shivering, and stiff muscles. How do we treat this? First thing you have to do is call 911 for medical help as soon as possible. Move to a warmer place. Get that wet clothing off. Warm with blankets, but above all, we say, don't put the affected person in a bath or shower. Hypothermic, that's one of the worst things you can do. Avoid that at all costs. Next, please. Staying safe in your vehicle. That's where this symbol comes in again. We display a trouble sign. You might want to make a trouble sign ahead of time, put it in your trunk. Make one that really has substance to it with large letters. Call for help, of course. Run the engine for short periods to heat the car. What I do with my car is I try to keep a full tank of gas whenever possible, at least half a tank. In the event that I get into a storm where we are isolated, we don't know how much time it's going to be before rescue crews can come through, we can at least start our car up to keep ourselves warm. That could be a lifesaver. Move around in the car, huddle with others for warmth.
So Greg and Molly, we're at 10:30 and we promised people this would be only an hour-long session. So I guess if you're willing to share your email addresses, if people have additional questions that they'd like to ask, and we can do that. And by all means, send me your materials and I'll forward them on to the group. That would be lovely.
Absolutely. And again, I'll just throw up the tools. Please look into it. There are some heating suggestions. There's tips for generators if you're using them during the winter, and alternative heating sources available on this website. So thank you again, Julie, so much for letting us.
Take a look also. Molly has sent these checklists for winter storms, safety checklist, and also one for the fires, the home fires. So please check your box. These things are also really important to use for your periodical review.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate such good information, interesting, valuable at this time of year. Thanks again for being with us. We have 2 more of these coffee and conversations scheduled for the next 2 months. On February 25th, we'll be talking about mobile money. So my kids say, Mom, just Venmo me with the money. I'm like, what's that? So what is Venmo? What is Google Pay? How safe is it to swipe a card over the thing at the grocery store or use my phone? So I have a lot of questions about that, and we'll get some experts to talk about the safety and which one's the most efficient of that type kind of thing. On March 25th, we'll talk about minimalist living. I know at this time, a lot of us are talking about downsizing a little bit, and how much can we get away without having it all? Cam and Carlene, you might appreciate this story. Where I used to have a pastor that said, all we need is what we really need is a little shelf by the back door to put our shoes on. And then they would joke, oh yes, and then we'll be happy. Just kind of acknowledging that stuff doesn't always make us happy. So we'll be talking with someone who went to the extreme of moving into a tiny house. Not that we all have to do that, but I think it'll be some good conversation. So you can register for those on the website. Again, it's free of charge. It's all going to be over Zoom, so it's all safe and that kind of thing. So look forward to that. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks again for joining us, everyone. Yay!
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if y'all have any suggestions of other topics you'd like to hear about, just let me know. We're happy to find the people and set it up.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Judy.
Julie.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Long.